Imagine standing in front of an Arctic night storm, where the wind slices across your face like tiny blades, and the ground trembles beneath a sheet of frozen earth. In a landscape where nothing should be alive, a low, dark, silent, mound-like house suddenly appears, and inside it is warmer than you'd ever expect. This is the secret the Vikings never said out loud. They didn't fight winter with muscle or thick hides, but with an engineering system hidden beneath layers of earth, where every wall, every roof curve, every doorway position was calculated like a battlefield move. In those moments, the Longhouse wasn't just shelter. It was a heat-holding machine designed to deceive the harsh northern cold, a structure that quietly absorbed the day's thin warmth and released it back in slow breaths through the night. Looking back, what shocks modern people isn't the materials they used, but their ability to turn soil, straw, and turf into a life-saving shield. Get one detail wrong, and the heat would drain out in hours. And before you step deeper into how they managed something that seems impossible, ask yourself this. If you were dropped into a night like this, with the north wind clawing at your bones, would you have the patience and sharpness to notice the very secrets that carried them through hundreds of winters? It wasn't by chance that a Viking longhouse could stand firm in a land ruled by blizzards. Before a single stake touched the ground, they went through a step modern people often skip: reading the language of nature. The Vikings didn't look for a pretty view or a convenient path. They quietly watched how the northern wind swept across the valleys, observed the angle where the winter sun slid down the sky, listened to the crack of frozen soil beneath their feet, and identified the spots where cold air pooled into freeze traps. Those gentle depressions that seemed safe were actually the deadliest places, where cold settled deepest, turning the ground into iron through the night and draining the warmth from an entire family. So they built on slightly higher ground, tilted toward the south or southeast, to catch whatever weak sunlight existed, and to avoid the cruel northern gusts spilling down from the ice shelf. That choice wasn't just inherited wisdom. It was a form of field science sharpened across generations. Misplace the house by even a few steps, and the entire winter could turn into a survival sentence. Once you understand that, you see the truth. A longhouse didn't begin with hammers or timber, but with eyes trained to read the subtle signs whispered by the earth and the wind to anyone patient enough to listen. If you look from the outside, the frame of a Viking longhouse seems like nothing more than a few curved timbers stuck into the earth. But when you step closer, you begin to see the truth that leaves many archaeologists speechless. That frame wasn't built like a house at all. It was assembled like an upside-down ship resting on land. This is the twist most modern people never expect. The Vikings brought the very mindset that carried them across the North Sea, their ship-building logic, into the construction of their homes, turning the longhouse into a structure capable of bearing snow loads far heavier than anything a straight timber roof could withstand. The roof ribs were bent in ways only skilled shipwrights could achieve. The wooden joints were fitted so precisely they could flex when the wood absorbed moisture and then tighten again when the air dried. Rope made from tree roots was tied using keel binding patterns, the same technique used to secure a ship's keel so waves wouldn't snap it. Thanks to this, the roof didn't collapse even when storms laid half a meter of snow across it, and when violent winds struck, the whole structure gently flexed, like a ship's bow slicing through the air. Even more astonishing, many house frames endured 80, 120 years without replacing a single main post. The Vikings didn't just build homes. They created a skeletal system that could bear weight, adjust to the climate, and protect the people inside, just as a hull shields sailors at sea. And once you grasp that, a natural question rises. If you had to build a roof to survive an Arctic winter, would you choose the technique of a carpenter or of a shipbuilder? Share your thoughts, because sometimes the secret to a civilization's survival lies in the techniques no one thinks to look for. If the house frame was the skeleton of the Longhouse, then the earthen covering wrapped around it was the armor that determined whether a family could survive an Arctic winter or not. What surprises many people is that the Vikings didn't pile earth onto the roof at random. They built it layer by layer, as if they were outfitting a warrior with multiple tiers of protection. First came the thick turf made of living grass and roots, cut into soft brick-like blocks. The root network acted as a natural self-locking net that kept the soil from sliding off even under crushing snow. Next was the compressed clay layer, dense and heavy like stone, whose job was to absorb every faint scrap of sunlight during the day and trap every fragile bit of warmth. Finally, they added a layer of fine, dry soil to resist moisture, turning the entire roof into a thermal mass, a heavyweight shield that could hold heat far longer than pine boards or thin planks ever could. Here's the twist. This earthen armor didn't just fight the cold. It reduced wind, insulated sound, resisted fire, prevented roof collapse, and even created a stable microclimate indoors. Where a modern house needs insulation, vapor barriers, windproof membranes, and multiple roofing layers, a Viking longhouse achieved nearly the same effect with nothing more than earth. Get the thickness wrong by just a few centimeters, and the roof would drain heat too fast, sending the indoor temperature plummeting like a drop into a frozen ravine. And hearing all this, ask yourself, if you had to choose a single layer of armor to shield you from blizzards and skin-cutting wind, would you dare put your trust in Earth? Share your thoughts, because sometimes the strongest solution is the one lying right beneath our feet. What made the walls of a Viking longhouse truly different wasn't just their thickness or shape, but the secret behind the way the materials were mixed. A formula that looked simple at first glance, yet was actually the result of generations observing how earth, straw, and ash reacted to an Arctic winter. The Vikings never used a single material on its own. They created a kind of heat-holding composite that could block wind, stabilize moisture, and store warmth all at once. Clay provided compression, letting the wall harden into something close to a solid mass. Straw was chopped fine and mixed in, forming a fiber network that kept the wall from cracking as it expanded and contracted in the cold. Each strand of straw worked like a hidden tendon, supporting the shell of the house. Hearth ash was added to absorb moisture and prevent rot, turning the wall into something that could almost breathe, stopping water from building up during the deepest nights of winter. Most remarkable of all was peat, a lightweight material that held warmth for a long time, treated by the Vikings as a natural heat battery. The twist lies in the precision of the ratios. Add too much straw, and the wall loses its density. Skip the ash and moisture will creep in, chilling the house from within. Leave out the peat, and the heat simply won't last until morning. Each wall, then, wasn't just a wind barrier. It was a structure fine-tuned like a piece of rough, early science, yet astonishingly effective. And it was exactly these ordinary-looking materials that allowed the Vikings to survive hundreds of winters without a single modern technology. If there is one part of the Longhouse that modern people misunderstand the most, it's the smoke system. Many imagine Vikings living inside a house that was always as hazy as a coal furnace. But the truth is both mysterious and refined. So much so that researchers have had to rethink everything they believed about northern architecture. Because the smoke inside a longhouse wasn't a problem. It was an invisible shield, an ancient technology the Vikings operated like a quiet ritual. When the fire burned, they never let the flames rise too high. Instead, they kept it steady to produce a thin layer of smoke that hovered beneath the roof like a dim blanket. That smoke layer trapped warmth from the hearth, slowed heat loss, and prevented cold drafts from slipping in through tiny gaps, acting like a warm air barrier that protected the entire roof from being chilled through. On the deepest winter nights, Vikings even adjusted the small vent holes in the walls, opening them when they needed the smoke to escape, or closing them to preserve that warm haze as if guarding a fragile treasure. What makes everything feel legendary is the sensation of stepping into a longhouse when the smoke was hanging. At the perfect level, the firelight shimmered through it, creating a soft, glowing veil that made the whole house feel like a world cut off from the raging blizzard outside. Many Norse legends describe the roof as a place where ancestors' spirits lived, perhaps because that very layer of smoke made everyone feel as if they were sheltered by something far beyond ordinary understanding. And maybe the most intriguing question of all is this: do you think that smoke layer was an accident, or a form of hidden technology the Vikings intentionally preserved across generations? Share your thoughts, because the way you see smoke today might just help unlock another piece of northern memory. In a Viking longhouse, the most dangerous cold wasn't the wind screaming outside the door. It was the floor, the seemingly harmless surface that waited patiently to steal warmth from the human body like a hungry, silent predator. The Vikings understood this perfectly. The moment you stepped onto bare earth, you could feel the heat being pulled from your body bit by bit, as if a cold hand were dragging your warmth straight down into the ground. And if an entire family slept on a floor like that, sunrise could easily become a luxury they would never see. To fight this heat hunter, they built a multi-layered floor that looked crude but was absolutely vital. First came the compacted earth, creating a stable base. Next was the fine hearth ash, the most important layer, absorbing moisture and stopping vapor from rising during the night. Thin as it was, ash acted like an invisible shield. Without it, moisture would seep through the straw, into the blankets, and then into the body, turning the cold into something deep and crushing, like a stone on the chest. On top, they spread dry straw, reeds, or old burlap to create an insulating cushion, turning the ground from a heat thief into a heat keeper. The climax lies here. Get even one layer wrong, especially the ash, and the entire house could cool so quickly that the elderly or young wouldn't make it through the night. Archaeological surveys in Iceland even show that where ash layers were missing, traces of daily life were abruptly interrupted, as if the cold had won. So what do you think? If you had to build your own heat-saving floor to survive a 28-degree Fahrenheit night, Which layer would you consider the most crucial? Share your opinion, because sometimes one small decision is all that stands between warmth and freezing cold. Inside a longhouse, warmth didn't come from the fire itself. It came from the way the Vikings arranged life inside the house as a closed-loop ecosystem. What surprises many modern people is that the longhouse interior wasn't arranged randomly. It was designed as a thermal circulation system, where every position contributed heat to every other part. Livestock were placed at the far end of the house, not for convenience, but because their body heat radiated steadily through the night, creating a layer of living warmth that drifted toward the sleeping area. The hearth sat in the center so heat could travel in both directions, while the beds were built along the walls where warm air naturally pooled after bouncing off the thick, turf-covered roof. The Vikings also slept in tight clusters, pressed close as if protecting the warmth of the entire group, turning every breath into part of the house's heating system. Here's the twist. The longhouse wasn't just a home. It functioned like a living organism, where every creature, every object, and every breath was placed precisely to sustain a continuous loop of heat. No detail was extra, and no empty space was meaningless. And if you were living in that space, where do you think you'd choose to sleep? Near the hearth, by the wall, or close to the livestock? Share your thoughts, because the spot you choose says a lot about how you'd face the cold of the far north. Inside a Viking longhouse, survival didn't depend only on thick walls or an earth-covered roof. It depended on winter discipline, an unwritten code the entire household followed, as if they were operating a warship in the middle of a snowstorm. Each night, the head of the family walked a full circuit, checking every door crack, reading the wind with the palm of his hand, and deciding whether the vents should stay open or be closed. One wrong call, opening them too wide and letting in a cold draft, or sealing them too tightly and trapping smoke, could turn the whole night into a battle against freezing air and stifling heat. To the Vikings, the Longhouse was a winter ship, and they ran it with the same strictness as a captain directing his crew through rough seas. The fire was never allowed to flare too high, or it would pull heat straight into the roof. Ash couldn't be allowed to pile up, or it would choke the hearth. Straw and blankets had to be checked to make sure they were still dry. Everyone had a role, managing firewood, rotating sleeping positions to balance heat, watching the embers, adjusting bedding. No one was allowed to slip up. Winter never forgave even the smallest mistake. And it's this strictness that created their unique kind of political flex. They didn't survive because they were the strongest, but because they knew how to run an entire system with silence, discipline, and unity. If you were dropped into a 28-degree-off night, who do you think you'd be? The Wind Watcher, the Firekeeper, or the Ash Guard? Share your answer. Do you think you'd stay calm enough to help steer this winter ship? When we step back and look at the entire Longhouse, from the turf armor heavy as iron, to the ship-built frame, to the way they placed the hearth, guided the smoke, rotated sleeping spots, kept straw dry, and tended livestock for heat, we finally see that the Vikings didn't just build a house, they built a survival machine, where every tiny detail was a link in a chain protecting life. And right at this point comes a truth, soft as a tap, yet sharp enough to make anyone pause. Winter waits for no one, and it will test every mistake you think you can ignore. Here lies the hook. Get one layer of soil wrong, miss one vent, skip a bit of floor ash, or misjudge a single turn tending the fire. Sometimes just one night was enough to make the entire system collapse. The Vikings survived not because they were stronger than us, but because they understood that cold never defeats the weak. It defeats the careless. That's the real lesson. Every earth-covered house doesn't just teach us how to keep warm. It reminds us that survival often comes from the smallest things. A right decision, a sharp observation, a moment where you refuse to overlook a detail. And before you leave this video, ask yourself, if you had to survive a Viking winter night, which detail would matter most to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might open a new door to this story. And if this journey through the earth-covered Longhouse made you realize the old world was far more intricate than we ever imagined, don't forget to subscribe so you can keep exploring the other secrets still sleeping beneath the cold northern soil.